You're listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for spending some time with us today. I am being closely monitored.
Good morning, everyone.
Getting the eye, making sure everything's where I want it. Oh, goodness.
Oh, no, he's just got this look on his face like he's ornery this morning.
Maybe. Real quick, Israel war update. You're still receiving propaganda. Use some discernment when you're looking through that stuff. Maybe one of these days I'll talk about that in depth, but not today. Don't forget, the books are still available. Don't sell them through the website, givegod90.com, just because I don't want to deal with it. That's the short story. That's why they're not available there. But I do suggest you go to givegod90.com if you haven't been there lately. Going to talk about something today that I have been asked. Why don't you talk about love more often? You've got to talk about love. And I, believe it or not, I kind of do. Just not in the way that you're used to hearing about it, right? Because the way you're used to hearing about it, apparently isn't biblical. So I thought I would try to explain why the way we think about love today is not the way the Bible explains love. And maybe I can make this a little more clear than mud. Because it let's face it, the evolution of language, the evolution of the way we think, the evolution of the way we process information has changed a lot of the things we think about. And we're going to start, Myra's going to read a passage that's often read at Christian weddings, and it was read at ours as well. So go ahead and read that. It should be very familiar to most Christians.
Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous. It does not brag. It is not proud. Love is not rude, is not selfish, and does not become angry easily. Love does not remember wrong done against it. Love takes no pleasure in evil, but rejoices over the truth. Love patiently accepts all things. It always trusts, always hopes, always continues strong. Love never ends. There are gifts of prophecy, but they will be ended. There are gifts of speaking in different languages, but those gifts will end. There is the gift of knowledge, but it will be ended. These things will end, because this knowledge and these prophecies we have are not complete. But when perfection comes, and the things that are not complete will end. When I was a child, I talked as a child. I thought like a child. I made plans like a child. When I became a man, I stopped those childish ways. It is the same with us. Now we see as we are looking into a dark mirror. But at that time, in the future, we shall see clearly. Now I know only in part, but at that time I will know fully, as God has known me. So these three things continue forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 13.
Now, that sounds very poetic, even from the International Children's Bible, doesn't it? That's just, oh, it's so lovely to talk about love. It's so wonderful. Look at love will endure all things. That's how it's presented, right? The problem is, and I really kind of blame the Christian church for this. We have reduced love to nothing more than an emotion that comes from our own heart. Now, longtime listeners will know I've often referred to love and to spirit, and have compared spirit to what we think of as an emotion, especially when referring to another one of Paul's letters. Let's listen to what he has to say.
The result of sins controlled in our lives is clear. It includes sexual immorality, impurity, and wild living, worshiping false gods, doing witchcraft, hating, making trouble, being jealous, being angry, being selfish, making people angry with each other, causing divisions among people, having envy, being drunk, having wild and wasteful parties, and doing other things like this. I warn you now, as I warned you before, those who do these things will not be in God's kingdom. But the Spirit gives love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. There is no law that says these things are wrong. Galatians chapter 5, verse 19 through 23.
Ooh. That kind of reminds me, there's actually a university in England now that has a class in witchcraft, conjuring different things. But that's for another time. I just happen to remember that. This passage, known as the fruit of the Spirit by most, but I like the way that the International Children's Bible makes it more clear that the Spirit, the breath, the words of our Creator, give these things. You see, it's not, doesn't come from inside, it comes from outside. The love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, these are manifestations or the result of what happens when we follow the Spirit, the words of our Creator. Exodus 34:6 reads, Then Jehovah passed in front of Moses and called out, Jehovah God, is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger. He is compassionate, he's gracious, he's slow to anger, maintaining loving devotion to 1,000 generations, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. Yet he will by no means leave the guilty unpunished. He will visit the lawlessness of the fathers on their children and grandchildren to the third and fourth generations. And as I've explained before, that is because they are taught by their fathers how to sin. And it often takes 3 or 4 or 5 or more generations to change that. Sometimes it can happen in one. Sometimes it happens when the father says, ooh, I messed up. I need to repent. Not often enough, but sometimes it does happen. You see, Paul takes exactly what Moses wrote and he puts it into what would have been his modern language at the time, so that the people living in Galatia would be able to understand it. Basically, Paul's writing a commentary on the writings of Moses. That's what he's doing. So is it any wonder that John would write that God is love? But let's not get too far ahead. I'm going to put what John writes in context if you want to read that passage.
Beloved, let us love one another, because love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love God doesn't. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. 1 John chapter 4, verse 7 through 8.
So whoever does not know God, that's kind of a poor translation. Because, Paul tells us that there's no excuse for not realizing there is a God. The Greek word used here is, I'm going to ruin this pronunciation because my Greek is terrible. Gienoko, I guess is how you say it, is Strong's number Greek 1097. And the common usage is, I'm taking in knowledge of or from, to come to know, to learn, I ascertained or I realized. So whoever does not take in knowledge from our Creator, whoever does not come to know our Creator, whoever does not learn from our Creator, or whoever doesn't realize yet who He is, cannot love. It's impossible. You can't truly love from the biblical definitions if you reject the Almighty. Okay? And it's because love is not an emotion that comes from our heart. Love is spirit. And the manifestation or the result of that spirit is displayed in the actions of the person who possesses that spirit. That means when someone possesses the spirit of the Creator, they display the attributes of love. And this leads to a question, at least in my mind. If we're supposed to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, and we have either rejected the Creator or any of His words, how do we love ourselves? Does that make sense? Okay. If we can't love ourselves, or if we don't love ourselves, is it reasonable to expect love from others in return? If we don't know how to love, can we expect love in return? Paul writes to the Ephesians in part, it's in 5:29, indeed, no one ever hated his own body, but he nourishes and cherishes it. Now, up to that particular point in history, and a little farther, it was understood that everybody cared about themselves. I mean, that's just kind of the way life was, right? I mean, it didn't take a whole lot of explaining. Today, I'm not really sure that's the situation. Look around at people who would rather put some poison chemical in their body than eat. Yes, I'm talking about the spirit of addiction there. Look at some of the people in the world who are so filled with the way they appear, they don't eat, or they purge shortly after eating. Look at people who would alter the way they're designed to look by our Creator to appear as something they're not. And I know a lot of you are saying, oh, that's the trans community. No, I'll include them. But look at the entertainers around that have had so many facelifts, they're barely recognizable anymore. You see, I'm not sure they love themselves enough to care about themselves. Many, if not all, of these folks cannot have the Spirit of our Creator because they reject His Word, or they have followed the world and reduced love to nothing more than some emotion that comes from within ourselves. They don't know how to love because they don't know where love comes from. Yeah, here I go again. When the Christian church began to send missionaries out into the most remote parts of the world, they found some cultures that, they might not know who the Creator is, but they understood that there was something that created and designed the world they lived in. Some of those cultures didn't even have a word for theft because they didn't need it. Nobody ever took anything that didn't belong to them without returning it until they were taught what it meant. Now, conversely, there were polytheistic pagan cultures that were very barbaric, right? And the difference is that the cultures that recognized a creator were more apt to be peaceful and loving, where the cultures that were polytheistic and warlike failed to recognize a creator. Without having the knowledge of our Creator, it is impossible to be able to love in a meaningful way. Now, the world's filled with parents, and they say, "Oh, we love our children," but some of these same parents are willing to abandon their children for drugs, sex, money, or whatever they lust after, because they have rejected the Creator and His Word. Now, I have jokingly said that the most common reason for divorce is marriage, right? It's kind of hard to get divorced if you're not married. But yeah, I just broke myself up with that a little bit. What makes a marriage last? It's not responsibility. It's not commitment. What makes a marriage last is the manifestation of love, the actions of the couple. And no, I'm not talking about sex. All right? Now, I would often ask when I counsel people, how do you know you're loved? And some of the answers actually surprise the other person, because they don't realize some of the things they do that express their feelings for the other person. Do couples do things that aggravate each other? Of course they do. And I know I do things that aggravate Myra all the time. She puts up with it. I don't know why, but she's put up with it for 32 years.
Because I love you.
And yes, she does love me, and I know that, and it's not because she tells me. It's because of some of the silliest, dumbest little things that she does. And it's not, we're always looking for the great things, right? But it's the small things that add up. It's the little things that display the Spirit which is given to us if we accept it, and it enables us to love. Our Creator offers His Spirit, His words. They guide us, and only when we follow that Spirit and are guided by that Spirit are we really able to love ourselves and our neighbor. Without the Spirit of our Creator, we cannot love. We might be concerned for someone. We might respect someone, but we cannot love them in a biblically defined way. If love comes from in us, when we reduce it to nothing more than emotion that comes from our heart, if you trust your heart, it's foolish. Proverbs 28:26. He who trusts in himself is a fool, but the one who walks in wisdom will be safe. Now, if you walk in wisdom, you're actually following the instructions of our Creator. You're allowing His Spirit, His Word, to guide you. We need to know. We need to get to know. We need to ascertain. We need to realize who our Creator is. We need to learn from Him. if we really want to love him, anything else is just going through the motions, and it will end badly. It always does. Love is not an emotion that comes from within. Love is a gift that comes from the Spirit, the very words, the very breath of our Creator. You can either choose to accept it or you can choose to reject it. But you cannot truly say, I love, without it. Now, I hope that makes sense as to why I say I have been talking about love. Because when we live the way we are designed to live, we have that. We know who our Creator is. We accept His Spirit, His Word, His breath. We follow that so that we are able not only to love ourselves, but to love our neighbors as well, and to love each other. Because love is an action. It's not an emotion. Love is the result, just like the other fruits of the Spirit that Paul mentions. They are all attributes of our Creator that manifest or result in action. Yes, patience is an action. Kindness is an action. Peace is an action. And sometimes it takes work. It is sometimes very hard to maintain peace. It's sometimes very hard to be patient. Most of you realize that. It's also sometimes very hard to love. And it's also very difficult sometimes to be tolerant of those who don't. Either way, we cannot, it is impossible to, by the definition of Scripture, love without the Spirit of our Creator. It's impossible to love without following His words, His guidance, and His advice. You can't do it. Not truly. When we reduce love to nothing more than an emotion, we're lost. We depend on ourselves. And that will always end badly. So, that didn't take as long as I thought it was going to take, which is a good thing for everybody out there today who's got other things to do. So, until Thursday. We wish you many, many blessings, everyone.
Yes, we do.